Hello, YouTube! In my last video, I covered how to make the game that we've been working on in the last couple of videos winnable by collecting about 10 pellets. In this video, I'm going to be adding some challenge to making that happen. As you can see, we still have our old sprites, the red ball, the blue bricks, the pellet, and the sparkle. However, there are some new sprites down here. The spikes, right, bottom, left, and top, and 3 enemy sprites. So, what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be adding 3 enemies, which will move around the map and will hurt the player if the player comes in contact with them. Now you can see there's also some other resources, the path resources over here, which I'm going to be using later, but right now let's just run it as it is. So let's just wait for it to load. So I ran it in debug mode, so you'll see the debugger over here. But as you can see, you can still move around just like normal, and you can collect the pellets. And then we can just sort of move around and play the game as we used to. But you may notice that there are enemies here that I've placed down. They're still not doing anything, though. And this is because there isn't any code in their events. So if we close this now, I'm going to be implementing some of these paths. So I've already made some objects for these enemies, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to place them down. And they're visible, and they have the enemy sprite, of course. In the create event of this one, I've added some special notes, because what we're going to do is we're going to use these path variables to basically give them a way to move. So actually, before I start coding here, I'm going to cover the path. So path enemy 01, basically what it is it's a bunch of linked points in the room, and that's what any path is. You can set it to be a smooth curve or straight lines. I'm just going to leave it as straight for now. But what it is that you add different points. And I've already made all the paths for this video. But if I wanted, I could insert a new point here, and I could set it to like y equals 72. And you can see there's a new point added. I'm going to delete that for now because I'm not sure what effects it would have on the actual path. But basically what it is you make a path, and I can make one right here. I'll just say path 01. And you add a point, so I can say that's 0, 0. We can change the position of that point, and then we can add new points by doing the insert and like editing these values. So that's basically how a path works. So now that we have our path, the way we're going to get the object on that path is you saw me typing in the path start function just a little while ago. But the path start function is this function that takes 4 arguments, or basically 4 parameters. So the first one is the path. So I'm going to say path enemy 01 because this is enemy 1, and I've already made the path for it, and yeah. So then we can set the speed, and this is just sort of the speed it'll go along. I believe at pixels per step. So yeah, the next one is end action, and as you can see, I've added some notes up here about the end action. And so if you put that to 0, when the enemy goes all the way around the path, it will stop and just do nothing else. If it's 1, then it will go around the path and start at the beginning of the path. If it's 2, it'll continue path from its position on the path, which will basically be useful if you don't have a completely connected path and you don't want it to just jump around in a loop. And then 3, you can set it to go along the path in reverse. So it would go around a circle, and then it would go reversely around the circle. I mean, if your path is a circle. But what we can do is, I'm just going to set the path end action to 1, because I have a nice loop path. So this will just mean it goes around the path, and it'll just continue looping around the path. And then absolute is another one, and I'm just going to set that to true. It's set to true or false, and it's just good to set it to true. That's a good reliable thing you can do. So I'm just going to set that path. So now this enemy will follow that path. And I can add these to the other enemies. So I'm just going to add 2 quick create events. I'm just going to copy paste these and replace the numbers. For some reason these are a little out of order. Like this is enemy 3 and this is enemy 2. Should probably reorganize them. But I can set these to their paths. And now if we run the game, it'll just take a minute to load. I'm just sort of running it in debug mode for the sake of doing it. But as you can see, they are each going around their paths. So they are moving in these set positions that I've already implemented. So they're basically going from a point. They're going from a point here to a point here and down. Oh, yeah. Well, they're going from a point here to a point here, down, up, and around. And basically what I've done is I've just set various points at which the enemies will go between. There is one thing missing, which is that when you collide with an enemy, of course we haven't coded anything to make you get harmed, or there's no adverse effect just touching an enemy. So that's what we're going to add now. So now that we've just seen that the paths work, I'm going to add a very quick collision. And let's say that when you collide with an enemy, the game restarts. So basically, when you hit an enemy, the game's over, and you just have to try again. So we can try this out now, and it'll just load. And if we just go and walk over, well, it's not really walking since you're a sphere, but if we just go over and collide with this guy, you'll see that the game just restarts. And we could add a bit of a smoother animation or some sort of effect in between, like a game over screen. This is just sort of the very simple restarting. But you may notice that if I collide with any of these other ones, nothing's going to happen. So you can see that there's a problem where I have one collision event for colliding with one enemy, and it'll make the game restart properly. But I would need to add another collision event for every single enemy I add. And what if I add like hundreds of enemies? Then you would have to have hundreds of collision events. Fortunately, there's a way around that, which is parenting. So I have my enemy object here, and it has this path start variable. And the ball is set to that when it collides with this object, the game will restart. So what we can do is if we set the parent of these objects, just with this little bar right here, to that enemy object, then they will follow the scripts of this object and will register as this object in terms of collisions. So now what we can do is we can just run the game again, and if I try to run into either of these enemies, now that they have that as a parent, when I collide, it'll register as colliding with the main enemy. I don't know why this came to the front here. I'll just close that. But so every time I collide with, here, I'm just gonna stop that. But every time I collide with one of those enemies, now that it has that as a parent, it'll register as colliding with that enemy. Now there is one issue, which is that all your enemies, or any object that has another object as a parent, will follow all the scripts of that object. So you may be wondering why these have not gone to the same path as that first enemy. And that's because the scripts of a child object, so if we have this as its parent, but they have the same event, the child object's event will take priority. So since this is a child object of this, but they have the same create event, they both have a create event, this, as the child object, will have its own create event occur rather than just following the original object's create event. And this will work with any event. But you can always you can have globally followed. You can have events that are followed by all the child objects. So you could have like a step event here, and if none of the other objects had a step event, then they would just follow the step event of the parent. So yeah, that's how parents work, very basically. And yeah, so I think that's all for today. I'm going to be going over some more enemies and hazards in the next video. This is going to be a bit of a two-parter. But yeah, for now, this is goodbye, YouTube. See you next time.